It's our stories. Welcome to a world where real stories sounds like a movie script.
I guess it all started with a phone call. It wasn't the usual, "How are you?" call either. It was one of those calls that immediately signals trouble. My mom, Catherine, doesn't call just to chat. She's not the type to ask about your day or what you had for lunch. If she calls, it usually means something is wrong and I'm expected to fix it. So when her name appeared on my phone, I braced myself. "Hey, Jacob," she said, unusually casual. "How's work? Still doing finance stuff?" I chuckled quietly. Mom has been ignoring my career for years, so this was her version of small talk. I played along, partly out of curiosity. "Yeah, Mom, still in finance." "What's up?" She took a deep breath. "Your sister's in trouble." That didn't surprise me. Megan, my sister, she has a knack for creating problems and expecting someone else to clean them up. Her mistakes weren't small. They often hit hard, and somehow I always ended up in the middle, cleaning up the mess. I remembered the time she took my car without asking and crashed it while texting. She called me, crying, and I dropped everything to help her. I handled insurance, paid the deductible, and let her off the hook because she promised she'd never do it again. Of course, she did, or the time I co-signed her apartment because she said she only needed a little help. 4 months later, she stopped paying rent and disappeared, leaving me to deal with the fallout. Months of repairing my credit while she moved back home with her parents, acting as if nothing happened. Megan has never been held accountable. And when I say never, I mean every single time she messes up, someone, usually me, has to step in. And gratitude? Forget it. She acts like the world owes her a safety net, so when Mom said she was in trouble, I didn't panic. I was tired, exhausted from constantly being the problem solver. I sighed. "What kind of trouble?" She delivered it like it was casual. Megan had racked up $46,000 in debt. $46,000. I had to say it in my head a few times to process it. Credit cards, loans, and this time she'd borrowed from people you really don't want to owe money to. Dangerous people. And of course, in Mom's mind, it meant I should fix it. "You need to help her," she said, like it was a given. I paused. "Help? How exactly?" "You've done well, Jacob. You can pay it off for her," she said casually, as if she were inviting me for dinner. I laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief. "Mom, I didn't borrow the money. Why is this my responsibility? I'm not paying anything." There was silence, and guilt tripping started. "She's your sister. Family helps each other. Do you want her to get hurt?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, I've helped her before. She spends it all on designer bags and vacations and doesn't take responsibility. I'm not doing it this time." Her argument didn't land. "She's struggling, Jacob. She's not strong enough to handle this." I let her words settle before answering. "She's reckless. She's an adult. She chose this. I'm not enabling her bad choices anymore. Mom wasn't convinced. She even threatened to cut me off. Do you want that, Jacob?" I couldn't help laughing. "Cut me off? You haven't supported me in over a decade. Threats don't work." I hung up, and that, I thought, should be the end. But it wasn't. Within hours, the messages began. Simple at first. "I don't understand how you can let this happen to your sister." But soon it escalated. Voice messages from Mom, frantic, teary, masterful, and guilt-tripping. Then Dad got involved. Soft at first. "Jacob, you're the strong one. Don't let us down now." Strong? Dependable? I'd been all that my whole life, and it had always meant extra responsibility, no appreciation. Then extended family joined. Uncle Jake, Aunt Lindsay, cousins. I hadn't heard from some in years. They all fell into the same pattern. Megan is struggling. "You can help her, only you can." I explained firmly I wouldn't pay her debts, and many understood. Some didn't. Megan herself finally entered the fray. Her texts were accusations, claiming I was selfish, uncaring, abandoning her. The irony was obvious. I'd spent decades covering for her mistakes, and suddenly I was the bad guy. She even tried rationalizing fraud. Someone had attempted to access my bank account with fake documents. Convenient timing. I drove straight to her apartment, confronted her calmly, and made it clear. I would never tolerate that again. From that moment on, I started cutting ties. Phone numbers blocked. Social media blocked. Minimal contact with relatives who tried to manipulate me. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief, freedom, space to breathe. The next few days were quiet, but the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the calm before a storm. My phone stayed silent, but my mind was restless. I knew this wasn't over. Mom and Dad don't give up that easily, and Megan, well, she never really gives up either. Then came the texts. First from Mom. Jacob, you can't just ignore this. Megan is in danger. You have to help. I didn't respond. She sent another. Do you want her to get hurt? Think about your conscience. I read it, felt a flash of irritation, and deleted it. Dad got involved next, leaving a voicemail. At first it sounded calm. Jacob, just checking in. We know your mom can be intense, but this is serious. Megan needs you. But by the end it was the same message, dressed differently. You're dependable. Jacob, don't let us down. Dependable, strong. All the words I've carried my whole life. Words that once meant pride now felt like chains. I realized that being the reliable one had been a trap. Every time I helped, it wasn't appreciated. It was expected. And now, when I finally drew a line, suddenly I was the villain. Then the extended family started calling. Uncle Jake, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, called out of nowhere. Hey, Jacob, long time no talk. How's life? He rambled for a while, then came to the point. Family is important, and Megan's going through a rough patch. She just needs a little help. I cut him off. Did Mom put you up to this? He laughed awkwardly. Well, maybe she mentioned it. I told him firmly, I'm not paying Megan's debts. Not my problem, not my responsibility. Next, Aunt Lindsay, then Cousin Sarah. Same story, same pressure. Megan is struggling. You can help, you're the only one. Every plea sounded like the same broken record. And every time they ignored the fact that Megan is an adult who keeps repeating her mistakes. It was worse when I found out about the family group chat. Mom had been messaging everyone, painting me as selfish, ungrateful, and self-centered. According to her, I'd forgotten where I came from, focused only on my life, and abandoned my family. Cousin Ryan, one of the few I trusted, called me to warn me. Dude, Mom's talking mad crap about you. I told him the truth. I hadn't said anything to justify Megan's actions. He believed me, but even he admitted, it's messy. Then Megan decided to speak. She had stayed quiet until then, maybe ashamed, maybe waiting. When she finally texted me, it was an accusation. I can't believe you're being selfish. You're supposed to be my brother. You're abandoning me. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Her entire life had been a series of mistakes that someone else cleaned up, and now she was upset that I refused. The following day, the texts intensified. You have the money. Just pay it off. I'll pay you back. Unrealistic, as if handing over $46,000 was a simple favor. I ignored it. Then the meltdown, long rambling messages about abandonment, suffering, and how I'd never understand. And, as if rehearsed, a final line. Mom and Dad said you'd come around eventually. I read it, and instead of guilt, I felt clarity. My parents had spent decades feeding her delusions, convincing her I would always be there. That was the last straw. I stopped answering her texts, ignored the calls, and focused on myself. But the family didn't stop. They escalated. The next day, the bank called. Suspicious activity on my account. Someone had tried to gain access using fake documents. It was obviously Megan. I drove to her apartment that evening. Calmly, no phone calls, no yelling. She opened the door. What are you doing here? She asked. You tried to steal from me, I said. Her face shifted for a second, then she crossed her arms. I don't know what you're talking about, I warned her. Don't even try it. The bank flagged it. This is serious. You can't do this? Her response? A shrug. What else was I supposed to do? You wouldn't help. I stared at her. You had choices, Megan. You could have taken responsibility, faced the consequences. This was a decision, not an accident. She rolled her eyes, doubled down. Mom and Dad said you'd come around. You'd help eventually. I couldn't believe it. Years of coddling, of enabling had led her here. I said calmly but firmly, I'm done. If you ever try something like this again, I'll make sure the authorities know. You need to grow up. I left without waiting for a response. Driving home, I realized this was final. I couldn't stay in their orbit anymore. My sister, my parents, the entire family dynamic, it was over. After that night at Megan's apartment, I knew things had to change. I couldn't keep running myself ragged, constantly cleaning up someone else's mess, while everyone around me acted as if I was the problem. I started with the simplest step, my phone. Mom, Dad, Megan, blocked. Social media accounts, blocked. No exceptions. I called Ryan, my cousin. the one person I trusted to understand. "Look," I said, "I need you to let me know if anyone tries to contact me through you, but otherwise, I don't want to hear anything. No updates, no messages, nothing." He agreed, supportive as always. It was a relief to have one ally, someone who understood without judgment. The first few days were strange, quiet, empty, and yet it felt good. I hadn't realized how much constant conflict had drained me. My mornings weren't filled with dread over incoming calls or texts. I could actually think, plan, focus on work, hobbies, and my own life. Simple things felt richer. Making coffee without glancing at my phone, going for a run without worrying about Megan's latest emergency, reading a book without a looming sense of responsibility. It was a relief I hadn't anticipated. Of course, the quiet didn't mean I was free from guilt. Occasionally, I'd hear a small voice in the back of my head. What if they're right? Are you being selfish? I would pause, think about every call, every text, every guilt trip, every threat, every manipulation, and the voice would disappear. No, I was setting boundaries. I wasn't being selfish. I was protecting my life, my stability. Weeks went by. Life slowly settled into a routine without them. Work was less stressful because I wasn't mentally exhausted from family drama. I started spending more time on things that mattered. Projects I had shelved, hobbies I had abandoned, people who actually supported me. Then came a call from Ryan. "Hey, just wanted you to know. Megan filed for bankruptcy." I paused, absorbed it. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy, maybe a pang of worry. But the truth was, I felt neutral. She had made her choices, and now she was dealing with the consequences. I told Ryan, "Well, maybe now she'll learn to take responsibility." "Maybe," he said. "But we both know it's unlikely." He was right. Megan had never been one to learn from her mistakes. But at least the pressure on me was gone. My parents had also faded from the drama, likely frustrated that their manipulation had failed. For the first time in years, I could plan holidays without worrying about pretense, without fearing arguments disguised as concern. I celebrated Christmas with friends, my chosen family, without that constant weight pressing on my shoulders. It wasn't simple. Cutting off family is never simple. But looking back, it was absolutely necessary. Toxic people, even if they're relatives, drain you, control you, and take more than they give. By creating distance, I gained clarity, stability, and peace. Ryan still sent occasional updates, as agreed, but I kept them minimal. My life was no longer about reacting to everyone else's chaos. I focused on myself, my work, and people who respected boundaries. I was done being the safety net for people who wouldn't even acknowledge the net existed. Sometimes I reflect on how far I've come. I don't feel guilty anymore. I understand my parents and Megan made their choices. They live with the consequences. And I live my own life, free from manipulation, free from expectation, free from being the responsible one for someone else's recklessness. I've surrounded myself with people who respect me, not people who guilt-trip me into compliance. I'm investing time in work I enjoy, hobbies that keep me grounded, and friendships that are reciprocal. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about respect, understanding, and support. And if those things don't exist, distance isn't betrayal, it's survival. I still get moments of doubt. Every now and then, the question pops up. Am I being too harsh? Am I being selfish? But the answer comes quickly. No, I'm being realistic. I'm being responsible for myself. I can't fix someone else's life at the cost of my own well-being, so that's where I am now. Free from constant manipulation, free to live without guilt imposed by others, free to build a life on my terms. And while the future is uncertain, at least I know this. My life is mine, not anyone else's. I'd like to ask anyone watching this, have you ever had to cut ties with family to protect yourself? How did it feel? Did it make your life better or worse? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Once the initial storm had passed, I began to notice the subtler changes in my life. At first, it was the silence. Not the oppressive silence that comes from avoidance, but a calm, steady quiet. No incessant texts, no phone calls dripping with guilt, no subtle accusations hidden in well-meaning advice. I could actually breathe. Morning routines became mine again. I could make my coffee at my own pace, listen to music I chose, scroll through news or social media without anticipating some new disaster. Weekends were no longer checkpoints for chaos. Instead, they were spaces to recharge. I started reading again, something I hadn't done without distraction in years. The old thrill of diving into a story or learning something new returned, and with it, a sense of self that had been buried under years of obligation. I even returned to the gym with purpose. Before, every session was a rush, squeezed between calls and constant check-ins. Now, I could focus purely on myself. Every drop of sweat, every aching muscle felt like a reclaiming territory that was mine alone. It wasn't just physical, it was mental. I was strengthening boundaries I hadn't realized were weak, rebuilding confidence that had been eroded by constant demands. Friendships deepened. People who genuinely cared about me, who weren't interested in draining or manipulating me, became more central in my life. I hosted small dinners, shared ideas, went hiking without worrying if a crisis would suddenly pull me away. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living, not surviving. And yet, I couldn't ignore the background noise of family drama entirely. Ryan would occasionally update me, brief messages about Megan's ongoing struggles or my parents' occasional attempts to guilt others on my behalf. I read them, nodded, and set them aside. They were no longer my responsibility. For the first time, I was able to let someone else experience consequences, something I had never allowed before. Megan's bankruptcy was a turning point. She had no one to bail her out, no one to shield her from the reality she had created. Part of me recognized the harshness of it, but the greater part knew it was necessary. Life doesn't hand out endless second chances, and I could no longer be the automatic rescue line. Her choices were hers, and I would no longer pay the price. The relief of autonomy was profound. I could plan my career moves, pursue projects I had shelved, and even start saving for things that mattered to me. I could finally treat myself as a priority without feeling guilty. The weight of family expectations had been lifted. In its place, there was room for genuine joy, curiosity, and growth. Holidays, which had once been a minefield, became simple again. I spent Christmas with friends who felt like family. There was laughter without tension, meals without manipulation, and conversations without guilt. It was ordinary, quiet, and deeply satisfying. For the first time, I understood that family doesn't always mean those we share blood with. It can mean those who respect and nurture us. I also began reflecting on boundaries more intentionally. The lessons were harsh, but clear. Trust is earned and respect is mutual. Enabling harmful behavior, no matter how much you care about someone, is destructive, not just for them, but for yourself. I had learned this the hard way, and now I was living by it. Months passed. Life settled into a rhythm that wasn't dictated by my sister's recklessness or my parents' manipulations. I didn't miss the arguments, the guilt trips, or the constant sense of impending doom. Instead, I had space to grow, to focus, to live intentionally. I was rebuilding my sense of self and reclaiming a life that had been overshadowed for too long. I've learned that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that save you. Walking away from family isn't easy. It isn't simple, but if the alternative is constant emotional drain, manipulation, and exploitation, distance becomes a tool for survival. And in survival, I found freedom. So now I'm focusing on what matters: work, friendships, personal growth, and my own happiness. I'm not sure what the future holds, and I don't pretend to. But I do know one thing. I'm finally living a life I can control, a life I can be proud of. I'd like to ask anyone watching this, have you ever had to set strict boundaries with family? How did it feel, and how did it change your life? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear how you navigated similar situations. As the months went on, life started to feel fully mine again. I began noticing small things I'd forgotten. The pleasure of a quiet morning, and the ease of having a plan without anyone else's chaos attached to it, and the way decisions felt lighter when they weren't filtered through guilt or obligation. I could go for a walk without calculating the potential fallout from Megan or my parents. I could make plans on a whim, without fear of another crisis that wasn't even mine. One evening, I met up with friends for dinner. It was casual, but it felt almost revolutionary. No tension, no side conversations about family drama, no urgent calls or texts interrupting the moment. Just us, laughing, talking about work, hobbies, and life. I remember looking around the table and thinking, this is what life should feel like. Simple, genuine, and not dictated by guilt or manipulation. For the first time in over a decade, I felt at ease in my own skin. I also started journaling again, something I hadn't done seriously since college. Writing down my thoughts, my frustrations, my small victories. It was therapeutic. I didn't censor myself, didn't worry about judgment. I wrote about the relief of boundaries, the quiet mornings, the reclaimed time. I reflected on the lessons I had learned, that responsibility has limits, that enabling harm only perpetuates it, and that family doesn't automatically deserve unlimited access to your resources or emotions. Even with the calm, there were moments of reflection, and yes, doubt. Sometimes I would think, am I being too harsh? Could I have done more? But those moments faded quickly when I remembered everything I had endured, the manipulation, the lies, the constant pressure to fix problems that weren't mine. Each time, the answer came clearly, no. I had to protect myself to live fully. I started making long-term plans again. Small things first, travel, a new project at work, redecorating my apartment. Every step felt deliberate, chosen, and free from interference. For the first time, I could pursue goals purely because I wanted to, not because someone else's expectations or crises demanded it. When Ryan called occasionally with updates about Megan, I listened, noted the facts, and moved on. Bankruptcy had forced consequences she had never faced before, and while I didn't relish her difficulties, I understood that this was her reality and no longer mine to fix. I felt a strange sense of closure in that. Finally, she was accountable for herself. Finally, my parents weren't dragging me into every mess. Looking back, I realized how much energy I had wasted. Years of cleaning up after others, of absorbing. Blame, of listening to guilt-laden speeches, and of trying to maintain peace at the cost of my own mental health. It hadn't been fair, and now that unfairness no longer dictated my life, I had reclaimed control. There were moments of gratitude too. I appreciated my friends more, the freedom I had, and even the lessons that came from hardship. I understood that boundaries weren't about punishment. They were about survival, about creating a life where I could thrive rather than constantly react. As I sit here now, writing this, I feel a calm I haven't known in years. The chaos that once defined my family interactions is gone. The weight of constant obligation is lifted. I'm free to live, to make mistakes, to celebrate victories, and to find joy in ways that aren't dictated by guilt or expectation. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Family isn't about control or entitlement. Family is about respect, understanding, and shared responsibility. But only when it's mutual. When it isn't, distance is sometimes the only path to self-preservation. And while it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, cutting toxic relationships entirely has given me something I hadn't realized I was missing. Peace. So I'm focusing on the life I want, surrounded by people who respect me and investing in my personal happiness. I can't change the past, nor do I intend to. Megan will face her life, my parents will live with their choices, and I'll continue building a life that is fully mine. I'll leave you with this thought. Setting boundaries, even with family, isn't easy, but it's necessary. Protecting your mental and emotional health is not selfish, it's survival. I hope my story gives someone the courage to stand up for themselves. Now I'd like to ask you, have you ever had to make tough choices about family? Did setting boundaries improve your life, or did it come with challenges you hadn't anticipated? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your experiences. Thank you for staying with me until the end. How would you have acted in the protagonist's place? Write your thoughts in the comments. More fresh and controversial stories every day on my profile. Like and subscribe to this channel.